No, I was always a tomboy. Like, I always presented as a tomboy. You know, when I came out to my younger sister, she said, I knew you were gay when you were like 10. I'm like, I wish you told me. But I didn't know until I was 24, 23, 24. Yeah, so I worked in queer nightlife for about 10 or 15 years on and off. Most of the jobs were Saturday nights or Monday nights or 1 or 2 nights or whatever. I did cooking as well. So sometimes when I'd be put on as like the only cook and the only bartender on like a Monday night when it's slow. So I'd be the bouncer, cook, and the bartender. In the early 80s, I worked at a place called the Upstairs Downstairs. And I worked at the place called the Rose Cafe, the only gay bar in London, Ontario. Women's bar. I worked there. And I worked with a woman there 1980 to 1983. And we served bed and breakfast. And we it was quite a happening place to supplement my income while I was. London was small, so the men and the women all hung out together. There wasn't a separation by genders. There's a lot of other bigger things you learn to do as a bartender. There was a place called the Homophile Club of London, Ontario. With codename Halo, and that had specific nights because sometimes it would be first time I went to a bar, so they'd have a date night on Thursday nights once a month, and I went in there and I men's nights. At first, I didn't realize it was just women, because at that point, women and everybody really did bush trade. Everybody did poppers then, like everybody. And they even had stuff there. Poppers, like you go into the bar, bananas and sauce and stuff like that. Breathe because the poppers were so bad, right? All the women knew all the men. We all went to each other's parties. We were all a group. We were the queers, we were the gays, and we all hung out together. And so when AIDS hit, we all kept hanging out together and taking care of each other. The first 2 years of HIV in London, Ontario, over 200 people died. London, Ontario, in many ways, was ground zero for HIV in Canada. There was a couple of the guys who were air stewards, and they'd been over to San Francisco and doing the partying and all the other stuff there, and brought it back, and the whole crowd was decimated. From the time that you find out someone was HIV positive to the time they died would be 3 months, 4 months. And sometimes you wouldn't even know. Like there wasn't even, people didn't even have time to develop like the sarcosis tumors and all the other identifiable so fast. You'd get like, you'd be perfect. You'd look a little run down, a little bit tired. You'd get a cold, you'd go to pneumonia, you'd be dead. That was the whole track. And so what was happening in London, I don't even think that it had been people identified as HIV was a matter of outing ourselves. I think it was just called the gay flu or something like that. It wasn't even identified as a pandemic. I mean, I remember when the first person I ever knew that got AIDS, we called he died. And we called the morgue, and they wouldn't say we're not coming to get the body because he's got the thing and we don't want it. It was Peter. His name was Peter. I don't remember his last name. Nobody had. This was back when it was against the law to be gay, right? So you only ever knew people's first. And if you saw them outside of the bar, you never acknowledged them. Well, there's 3 people came to mind when I was thinking about preparing for this. The first person was a guy named Lucille, and I don't even know if that's his real name, but we all called him Lucille. And Lucille would come into the bar every night. He would sit down in his chair. He would order a red wine with a lime twist, and he would face the wall, and he would drink. That's what he did every night. I never saw him speak to anybody. It got so he wouldn't even tell you what he wanted. You knew what he wanted. He'd pay you, and then he'd leave, right? And there were all kinds of rumors about who he was. Apparently, he was a costume designer and tailor for Stratford and for the Grand Theatre in London. He was a very, very good artist, very incredible guy. But he was very flamboyantly gay, and so was always getting beat up and was always getting assaulted and all kinds of things like that. And so when he came into the gay bars, he just wanted to drink himself into oblivion, and he was very snarky if anybody talked to him. He was one of the first people that died of HIV. It was a weird kind of passing because this is right at the very beginning when people didn't really know what was going on and people were just disappearing. You'd be like, oh, where's so-and-so? I haven't seen them for a while. Oh yeah, they're gone, they died. So there was all that kind of thing happening, right? And Lucille was one of the first people that left, and we actually held his bar stool blank, just empty, for almost a year, just in honor of the guy who never spoke to us. He just disappeared, and somebody, because
obviously there's all kinds of different vocations and stuff within the bar, and one of the people that were nurses said, oh yeah, he died. The other fellow I was thinking of was a guy named Rory, and Rory was hilarious because Rory was so flamboyant. Rory always wore red pants, always had a big white scarf that he'd fling around to and fro, and he always had a fucking whistle that he would blow every time he was up dancing on the dance floor. And he'd fling his scarf and blow his whistle. He was a nightmare. We loved him, but he was a freaking nightmare, right? Classic kind of traditional, whatever you think. He was our weirdo, and we were going to defend the stereotypical, whatever. That's what he was, right? He liked every gin and tonic with a twist of lemon and lime. And he always liked a straw, because he didn't want to ruin his lipstick. And so when Rory died, because we'd all bitch about it, we're all like that, but I'm going to get that whistle and jam it down his throat. Like, we would just all be, and a couple times people would take his whistle the next day and come in with a gotta do whistles, yeah! He was just that kind of guy, right? And I remember when he died, just because, it's kind of like the spring that never comes, where you're sort of waiting for the door to open and him to fly in and be like whistling and blowing and yelling and screaming, and then all of a sudden one day he just didn't show up. And a lot of people, when they died, it was like that. And so after 3 or 4 people sort of disappeared, then people started getting sick. So that and then people would be like, they developed these sarcoses, those little mole things that would be like a cancerous tumor that people used to develop way back when AIDS was first around. So you'd watch for people, and if people were losing weight, you'd be like, oh man, they're sick. Patrick was funny. I mean, he was, he'd run a bar at different points. He'd run other bars and stuff, and I'd worked for him. And, he was actually a very serious guy. He was very straight presenting. He did not have a great sense of humor. Anyways, he made his money doing bars, and before that he'd been an accountant. So I don't even know why he got into making bars his business, but he did. Patrick had actually been dying and asked me to stay and sit with him and talk to him and keep him company and stuff. And at the end of Patrick's life, I've been going through the process with him and helping him. He had a young child that he'd adopted and was looking after. And I helped him make arrangements for his son because he knew he was going to die and everything else. And at the very end of his life, he said to me, I don't want to shrivel up and die. He said, will you lie down beside me and keep me straight so that I don't shrivel up and die? And I said, I will. And so that was my first really close experience with somebody dying of AIDS. And a week or so later, he died. They weren't picking up the body, and churches would, at this point, the Catholic Church was raving about, AIDS is God's punishment on gay people, and, they're getting exactly what they deserve, and, they were really terrible. The church, except for the United Church, was terrible. The other part of what HIV infections and gay people in general. After he died, I wanted to do something, so I did the service for him. I'd never done a service before in my life, but I thought, I'm going to organize something. I'm going to say a few prayers. I'm going to talk about his life. I'm going to, whatever. I'm going to do this for him. And I did it for him. And after that, when we were all sitting around crying and thinking about it and thinking about, it's bad enough that there's a disease out there that's going to... And I remember being so mad after I did the service for Patrick. I wrote a letter to Emmanuel College at the University of Toronto. I said, you know what? The problem with your church and the church in general is that you won't ever let people like me come and be ministers, because we're living on a street doing outreach and doing ministry the way it's supposed to be done, the way I believe Jesus would have done it if he was alive. And that's how I ended up in Emmanuel College, because one of the people that read my letter, she wrote me back and she said, if you could get here, I will fund all of your education. We will give you grants and we will get you through, and we will get you through the process if that's what you want to do. But we need voices like you. And her name, you'll love it, her name was Professor Doris Dyke. There was a point where every week somebody died. Sometimes 2 people died. Michael was a funny guy. I mean, Michael was one of the smartest people I've ever met in my entire life. Like, he really was very, very clever. Michael never drank. Michael wasn't a drinker. Michael was more likely just to drink like pineapple juice. I think he liked pineapple juice. I ended up marrying Michael because Michael and I had been both working at the bar forever and had been very, very good friends. And in fact, we're living together and, everything was groovy. He's totally gay. I'm totally gay. Nothing like that ever going on. But at a certain point, we looked at each other and we went, there's only us left. I got involved, Beefcake was gone, Peter was gone, Patrick was gone, Paul was gone. Greg was gone. We just went through names, right? And they were all gone. And it was almost like a survivor's guilt that made us commit to each other, because we just felt like the whole community had fallen apart. That people would get sick and their biological families, most of whom really hated them anyways, or nobody would take over, and the person would disappear and we wouldn't have any chance to say goodbye or do memorial things afterwards. Even partners that have been together 20, 30 years could not go in and say goodbye to their loved one. People would disappear, you'd hope they moved away, you'd hope that something had, met somebody, settled down, fill in the blank, anything but died of AIDS, died of HIV. The worst thing for me, and the moment that it broke something inside of me, was I guess it was 1988, and I was at Pride in Toronto, and I hadn't followed the whole parade route, but I was sitting at the Queen's Park waiting for the parade to come in, and when the parade started coming in, I was looking, and I realized for the first time the drag queens were gone. There were no drag queens. They'd all died. Every single one of them was gone. And I cried. I cried for about an hour there, just devastated to think that that's how many people we lost. We lost hundreds of people. Hundreds of people. Well, I'm sure there are people around. I mean, I know. I'm trying to think. There are some of us around, and I bump into them occasionally in gay bars or different places with gay people, and it's almost become the thing we don't talk about. I mean, Lucille was late 60s, right? That Lucille embodied the gay queer community for the past 50 years before I came onto the scene, right? And had all those memories and all those thoughts and all those things, and it was the history that we lost. If you look at someone that's my age, then if you're a queer person looking at someone like me, remember that it was my rage that got you a lot of the rights you have, right? And my rage was fueled by HIV/AIDS. Ultimately, the horror of living through the AIDS crisis made the survivors demand that our chosen families be given the same respect and rights as our biological ones.